The Colts have announced the dates for their camp practices, which means you now know when you can watch your team back on the practice field. And we're going to tell you what we're watching for. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you once again by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. What's up, friends? This is Jake Arthur and Zach Hicks at horseshoehuddle.com. I am your resident media member for the Colts, and Zach is the gosh darn best film guy in the biz. And today we are here to talk to you a little bit about Colts training camp. Very, very important stuff. Very important news. The team came out with all the dates and times and themes and all that good stuff for their camp schedule yesterday evening. And so we wanted to bring you our thoughts on that. Obviously, if you haven't seen the schedule yet, we'll bring you that. We'll kind of tell you the most important dates, including a few joint practices that they'll be having with other teams, and then some of the just kind of the main things that we're going to be looking for there. So let's go ahead and start out at the top here. We've got this camp schedule for you. Blocking our faces out totally. We'll here's a quick brief glimpse at it. We'll also put it in the show notes as well for audio and video listeners. But yeah, so you got they report rookies and vets all in the same day on Wednesday, July 24th. So that's less than a month away finally. First practice Thursday, the 25th. 10 in the morning. I'm enjoying Shane Steichen being a morning guy on these morning practices. That means our afternoons are mostly open. I will say they get out there for a quick 1 hour practice on Thursday, the 25th, but then they take, I'm assuming it's just going to be a day of meetings. I'm assuming on Friday, the 26th, before they get back to it on Saturday and Sunday, July 27th and 28th. Basically, we've got 12 open practices this year for fans. It's going to feature, it's at Grand Park Sports Complex, of course, like it is, because they've got that long-term deal there. So that almost goes without saying. They close camp on Wednesday, August 14th and 15th with a couple evening practices. They're at Grand Park hosting the Arizona Cardinals for some joint practices. The following week, they will be having one joint practice in Cincinnati against the Bengals ahead of that preseason finale. I don't know if that's open to fans. I haven't seen anything about that. So I can't say. I'll be there, but I don't know if it's open to fans. Zach, I remember the days when this was all geographic. Like, do you think it's wise in the preseason for teams to be flying across the country, like the Bears and Bengals and Browns, and like it seems like in Detroit, like it seems like it would make more sense to kind of mix it up with teams closer to home, but heck, I mean, if they want to do it, that's cool.
Yeah, I remember growing up, Washington and Baltimore played every single preseason. I know the Colts and Bengals played every preseason, it felt like, growing up. So, yeah, a lot of really weird things it feels like with preseasons nowadays and off seasons. I mean, because like when you look at this, right, we're looking at what, a grand total of maybe 16 hours of practice throughout all of this, like maybe 14 or 15 hours, because most of these practices are like an hour 15 long. So we don't really have much field work, honestly, nowadays when it comes to a lot of these training camp things. So maybe that contributes to not only the Colts' propensity to start slow every single season, but maybe the rest of the league starting slow. It feels like every first couple of years, the first week of the season is typically one of the more chaotic ones, just because nowadays you have 3 preseason games, like only like 1 or 2 of them you actually see starters in whatsoever. And you only have 15 hours of practice throughout the whole offseason. And that's it. Then you're ready to go. 15 hours of practice. Then you have 2-ish, 1-ish preseason games, and then you're going. You're out there for week 1. So very interesting stuff there. I'm curious to see if there's a correlation between like recent years, week 1 being more sporadic than years before. But anyway, that's just another tangent right there. There are a couple of cool fan events throughout training camp as well, Jake. I know for you, obviously, you're going to be getting out there to most of those practices. For a lot of the fans listening to this show, I know a lot of you guys are local. You want to get out there to some of these really fun days like Family Day and Back to School Day. So, Jake, I know you've been to a bunch of these in the past. Like, are these like, cool, bring your kid events too in training camp?
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of for those of you who haven't really been out there, just to set expectations. So they do have theme days most of these days. I think there's only like 2 that they don't. But like, let's see. Since most of these are in the morning, I don't know how they're going to approach all of them. But like camp kickoff, obviously that'll be really kind of raucous. They'll have the most people there that weekend, I'm sure. So Give Back Sunday is one, which I was thinking taking back Sunday the whole time. And you cannot convince me that someone in the Colts marketing department didn't have that in mind. So Give Back Sunday, I've got to imagine that's going to be probably like a canned food drive or something like that. So, and on Colts.com, I'm sure they have way more details on these. Back to school, obviously, I think that will probably feature like you could donate school supplies and things like that. I think they've done that in the past. Salute to service. I think they usually have a flyover for that, or like even like a helicopter comes, and there's cool military-based stuff for that. Fan Appreciation Day, which I believe was rained out last year.
Yep, it was.
That's in Thirsty Thursday. Those are the final 2 ones against the joint practices with the Cardinals. But yeah, the Colts have this thing called Colt City. I believe it usually opens like 1 or 2 hours before practice starts, and then it closes around the time that practice is over as well. They've got a ton of stuff for the kids. There's always food and drinks and everything, but there's a lot of cool like obstacle courses and games and all sorts like interactive. Like they have like a small museum type thing, I think as well, that goes over Colts history. But it's definitely like each day is a family event, even Thirsty Thursday, I would imagine. But it's always okay to bring your kids to this thing. Now, weather permitting, there's always at least 1 to a handful of practices that are rained out, so to speak, each summer. When that happens, they go inside to the indoor facility, which they do then kind of have to clamp down on how many people they allow in. I forget how many get to come in, but basically it's first come, first serve. You better go ahead and get in line, go over to the indoor facility, and then the first however many will be able to observe practice. So you always kind of have to be prepared for that and know that, weather permitting, that will be moved indoors. Practice will still go on, but you may not still be able to watch it.
Yeah.
But no, always good the Colts have a really good setup where fans and players get to interact. At the end of every practice, there's always like a designated group that will come over to the like the barriers of the stands and sign autographs and do stuff like that. So it's always it's a good family friendly time that the Colts put on every year.
Yeah, for sure. But I will say for all going out there to a couple practices this year, the big one will be that Wednesday Fan Appreciation Day, because it will be a joint practice. It will be a 2-hour long practice. And it is that Fan Appreciation Day on Wednesday, August 14th. So make sure you're getting tickets to that as soon as possible. I'm sure Jake will update you guys whenever the tickets do go up there for that stuff there. But really cool stuff, guys. And we're going to kind of transition out of here, though, and talk about more of those joint practices and what we're looking for in those joint practices and kind of why those are such important days for the Colts coming up.
Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and whatever. Whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or it's your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
And are you guys watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? You have to turn down the volume with all that shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel is programmed for you every single day to bring the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, guys, we're back talking about the important dates in practice. Obviously, we talked about the big days for fans. Jake has it here in our notes that tickets are $5 for fans 18 or older on August, or what is it here? We got July 27th, July 28th, August 4th, August 14th, and August 15th. So even more reason to get out there for those joint practices on August 14th and 15th. I mean, $5 for fans 18 or older. That's nowadays, man, getting a price like that is just unbeatable right there. But talking about those joint practice days, especially the Cardinals one, you're going to be in front of your home fans. It's going to be a time where you can really see like Anthony Richardson and see a lot of these really fun players in a more competitive environment. Like, I'm not saying that training camp itself is not competitive, but it always gets a little chippy when you get another team in here, even if it's a team that's not like a division rival. Get a team like the Cardinals in here. I remember years ago when I came out to practice, and it was I want to say the Browns were here in 2018, and there was fights every 5 minutes when I was out here for that Browns. Or it was 2019, I believe. The Browns were out here as a fight every 5 minutes. Last year there were a couple fights that broke out. Like, it gets really chippy, and it's fun to see your players. Like, again, you don't want to see fighting and injuries, but you want to see your guys get kind of chippy, get a little bit, competitive, and kind of get into that more serious environment of going against, like a foreign opponent. So those joint practice days, they're as close as they really get to actual season stuff. And I believe Shane Steichen said last year, like, in a way, those joint practices are more valuable than the preseason to him. I mean, he doesn't play many starters in the preseason. He's just not a fan of that. So those joint practice days are really where he's going to get in the most meaningful reps of the offseason in the way that he installs his offense and defense.
Yeah, I think particularly against Arizona because, the coaches already work out expectations and what they want to do, what they want to accomplish, and like kind of the ground rules for the joint practices ahead of time. Steichen will be going against Jonathan Gannon, who they already were in Philadelphia together. So there's already the friendly competition there. But I think it's going to be good for fans to see that in front, because I think Shane's going to have the upper hand. I'll be honest there. But no, that'll be good to see. The Cincinnati one will be interesting. That'll just be one game, or one practice. So I don't know how much they're going to do in that one, because that's also ahead of the final preseason game. I did want to mention before we get too far down the road, though. So the $5 for those 5 primetime practices, I don't really know why they're calling it primetime because 2 of them are in the morning. So they have 5 of them labeled, and those are days they anticipate are going to be like probably the busiest. It's July 27th and 28th. So it's the first 2 weekend practices, and then the 14th and 15th, as well as August 4th. But they're making it $5 instead of free for those ones because they, number one, again, the high volume, but they also want to be able to better gauge how many people to actually expect and then put on a better product for those people in those busier practices. So I know some fans are going to be like, it used to be free, but that's why. That was the explanation that the Colts gave. But no, the night practices are always a good time as well. So you'll especially want to be out there for the joint practices. It's a good gauge to see, like Zach said, it is kind of a replacement for the preseason for the Colts, because when they're practicing against their own team and in each other, it's kind of like trial and error, seeing what works. Like, you're trying to accomplish certain things. You're not trying to win something, and they're not trying to necessarily win something against the Cardinals and Bengals in these either, but they are trying to be successful. So it's a different tempo and a different kind of tone than what you'll see in those other 10 practices. So especially those final 2 days of camp, I think you guys will definitely want to check out.
Yeah, and another cool storyline, like you mentioned with Gannon and Steichen, I mean, an interesting thing about their dynamic is that they have run practices together in the past when they both worked together in Philly. So it's not going to be so much like Steichen's pushing his guys one way and Gannon's pushing his guys a different way. Like, these guys are going to have a little bit better synergy than most coaches would, when it comes to running joint practices together, because they've already had that experience. Another thing to add too is Marvin Harrison Jr. coming to Indy. All right. I mean, the Cardinals' 4th overall pick coming to Indy. I know a lot of you guys wanted the Colts to trade up for him somehow. I don't know how they were going to be able to accomplish that. But yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. coming back to put on a show. Hopefully not, but might put on a show here in the Indy joint practices. So that's a little fun thing to watch there. The Cardinals are, they're a pretty good team. Again, I think they weren't the greatest team obviously last year, but they kind of feel like the Lions before the Lions took off, where it's like the coaching staff feels like they have a good thing going right now. They're a competitive team despite not being like the most talented, and they're a feisty little team. Like, again, this isn't like you're not practicing against the Chiefs, so I'm not trying to say like watch the Colts get their butts kicked all week or anything like that, but it is a team where it's like a feisty, competitive, younger team, and I think they're going to get out there and they're going to be pretty chippy throughout the week, and it's going to be just a really competitive environment. So for two of the youngest teams in football, I think this is going to be a really, really fun week, and I'm actually glad they got the Cardinals over, some of the other potential matchups they could have got across the league.
Yeah, and this may sound boring, but I'm actually really looking forward to Joe Flacco in the second team offense. Because the Cardinals defense is like so barren that the second team defense for the Cardinals going against a guy that just won comeback player of the year, like, I am ready to see that. I think that might be a bloodbath, whatever that equates to in practice, but I don't know.
I don't know if I would call it a bloodbath. It's going to be Joe Flacco.
But if we hope to not see Joe cook at any point in the season because we want it to be Anthony the whole time, that's our main chance, is to see him absolutely shred against defenses in these joint practices.
Look, Jake, you know what's going to be. It's going to be Flacco is going to finish the week with 10 touchdowns, like 7 interceptions, and every pass is going to go over 30 yards down the field, because that's how Joe Flacco is right there. It's going to be a good time for sure, though. It's going to be a really fun time for you.
Anthony Gould is going to cook the entire Cardinals second team secondary, and that's just going to be a good time.
Sometimes. Again, some of these balls will go way over his head to a safety sitting over the top, but that's just how Joe is. That's how Joe rolls right there.
You got to be a gunslinger. That's what Brett Favre was, right?
Okay, yeah. So here we go. That's the big headline from this. Jake compares Joe Flacco to Brett Favre right there.
Am I wrong?
Perfect. Clearly, it's off-season content we're going for right here, Jake. But coming up, guys, we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty. We're going to talk about the things that we're looking forward to in training camp, which players we are hoping to impress, and which answers we're trying to find on this Colts roster.
Summertime means baseball. The NBA Finals, which just completed, the NHL Stanley Cup is over, and more. I mean, baseball is obviously king this time of year, but I mean, we've got the WNBA. So right now, new customers, you guys get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 that you can use for everything from MVPs and playoff races to who's going to hit one out of the park. Right now, the Fever take the court next tonight in Seattle on Prime Video, and they are big 9.5-point underdogs on FanDuel. So go show the odds makers who's boss, and win a little money when the Fever actually wind up turning it out. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Zach. So when we're talking about things we're looking for in training camp, I'll just get the elephant out of the room right now. Yes, Anthony Richardson. That's what we want to see the most. Last time we saw him, he was only partially participating in the mandatory minicamp. Chris Ballard has already come out and said he's going to be full go. The expectation is that all these guys will have been working together, Anthony and the skill position guys, throughout the offseason, so as to really not miss a beat. So early in training camp, historically, things are a little clunky while guys get back into the swing of things after being off 6-7 weeks, at least off of like team regimented practice. Like they've been doing their own practicing. But, again, like we mentioned, trying to accomplish things and basically speeding up what they've done in walkthroughs, because in today's NFL where practice is so, you can't do as much as you used to be able to because of time constraints and physicality and everything. I feel like teams really try and just use their walkthroughs as real practice and then make the practice the sped up live version of it. So it'll be probably a little clunky early on, but I mean, by the time we get into the first full week of it, I think we really want to see Anthony looking comfortable again and having some chemistry with some of these receivers.
Yeah, and for me to get an even bigger elephant out of the room real quick too, and this kind of pertains to Anthony as well as a lot of players. Please stay healthy, everybody,
Oh
this
yeah.
offseason. We've already lost Daniel Scott again. I don't know if we can lose more guys. All right, let's have everyone stay healthy. Let's put people in bubble wrap for scratches and stuff. Like, let's stay healthy out there, please, guys. Last year we lost Ashton Dulin in training camp. Jonathan Taylor obviously didn't participate in most of training camp. Zach Moss broke his arm in training camp. I'm trying to think if there was countless other players that went down. I think Jelani Wood's injury happened around training camp or mini camp time. Gosh, there were so many injuries that happened in training camp last year, and it kind of impacted the Colts' depth and starters in a lot of ways. So just stay healthy this year, please, everybody. Let's sign a pact right now. We're going to stay healthy. We're going to stay clean. But and that obviously applies to Anthony Richardson too. But one thing I wanted to add with Richardson, especially in regards to just that comfort level in the offense and growing every single day, is I want to see him take more shots, I think, in training camp and just have more confidence on those deeper developing routes. We saw last year when he was on the field for the Colts, those first couple of games was a lot more of the checkdowns, a lot more of the shorter passes, which is perfectly fine. Like, don't get me wrong. This offense is the layups and 3-pointers of NFL offenses. So it's fine to take a bunch of layups to set up those 3-pointers, but you got to take those 3-pointers when they're there, to stick with the analogy a little bit. The Rams game was a good start. I think that Titans game in his final game that he played, there were a couple really good moments in there as well. But I don't think he fully got comfortable with taking advantage of deep shots and taking, those shots when they were there down the field. I mean, there's a couple throws against Houston. There's a couple opportunities against the Jaguars where he passed up a deeper developing route in order to get the ball out of his hands. So I really want to see from him in this training camp and just this offseason in general is the not the clock just being like more sped up in his head, but just the clock being more correct for what the play call is. Instead of it being, I need to go 1, 2, 3, 4 route, like with my reads, make sure that, like on some routes you can go 1, 2, 3, you can go 1, 2, 3, like, have the proper pacing in your head for how long you want to sit on a routes and when you want to get to that second, third, fourth option. It doesn't always have to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like we saw in that Jaguars game to start the year and a little bit in that Texans game as well. Like, it's fine to sit and let plays develop a little bit, especially behind a really good offensive line. I think once he's able to do that, especially here in training camp where he's going to get these extended reps with guys, I think once he's able to do that, he's going to be a very good passer in the NFL. I think that was the biggest thing last year for me. So if he can show by week 2, week 3 in training camp that not that the process is like sped up, but the process is actually a little bit slowed down and he's more comfortable making those longer developing reads, I think we're going to see a really good passing quarterback this next year from Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point because from the practices we saw this offseason, we saw 4 practices with him. He was taking a lot of checkdowns. Not that he didn't push the ball occasionally, but when you compare it to what Joe Flacco was doing in terms of his aggressiveness, Anthony, I felt, was trying to be a bit more intentional and methodical, practicing certain things, whereas Joe was just pretty aggressive. So no, at a certain point, obviously going deep is a level of comfortability, like you said.
Yep.
So that'll definitely be good to see. Something else, I almost kind of throw the run game out during the summer because it's like, we'll see what it looks like week 1 of the regular season. So I'll skip ahead to like the passing game. Specifically, AD Mitchell, does he carry his solid offseason or like OTAs and all that into training camp? And the health of the tight ends, because God, that's huge. We talked about, if Kylan Granson and Mo Alley Cox are still your 2 primary tight ends throughout the season, then something went wrong. So at least let it be because of a lack of taking advantage of the opportunity and not health determining it once again.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of positions on the depth chart right now that obviously come down to what happens in training camp.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to take that backup running back role? Is it going to be Trey Sermon? Like, it looks like it's going to be Trey Sermon, but is it going to be Trey Sermon by the end of training camp? Obviously, wide receiver depth chart, I think we know the 6 names that are going to make it, but in what order and what role are these guys playing? What's the pecking order, and what's the rotation look like with the starters on offense? Tight end, I don't think we know any of the pecking order at tight end. Like, outside of Mo and Granson are going to get some shots because they're the vets, but besides that, like, I don't know what the pecking order there is at tight end. So we got to see who can really emerge out of that group. Offensive line depth. Again, we kind of know the guys who are probably going to make the roster, but what's that pecking order look like behind the 5 starters? You know, who's filling in at right guard, who's filling in at center, who's filling in at tackle, you know, stuff like that. You go over to defense. I mean, which linebackers step up behind the 2 starters? Safety. Do any of these safeties step up besides Julian Blackmon? That's a massive one right there. Cornerback. A lot of young players at corner. Are guys like Juju Brents and Jalen Jones taking that big step? Do the rookies factor into this at all? How does Dallas Flowers look after the Achilles injury? There's a lot of question marks on this team, and not like negative question marks, but just question marks like, do we have the answer on the roster? Do we have guys who can take that step? And how are these guys going to look in training camp? So I think when you're looking at this training camp for the Colts, like, the overall quality of this roster really comes down to how these guys are looking this offseason. Because if it looks like a mess all offseason, then this roster might not be as strong as what we expect. But if you get some guys stepping up at several key positions, if Jelani Woods looks like, you know, the potential we all expect, if Trey Sermon locks down that RB2 role, if Jalen Carlise becomes the true coverage backer that we always needed at linebacker, if Dallas Flowers looks like Dallas Flowers again, if Nick Cross is figuring it out, like, this could be a really good team. But a lot of it really comes down to what these guys look like in camp, the comfort level the coaching staff has with these guys, and who comes out and just makes the most plays.
Yeah, there aren't very many spots on this roster that seem up for grabs. Like, there's depth spots, but like free safety you mentioned, there's the 3rd cornerback spot, that 2nd outside spot. That's something I'm looking for as well. You know, those spots are up for grabs, but you know the contenders for it. So Dallas Flowers, Jalen Jones at corner, Nick Cross, like you mentioned, Rodney Thomas. That one at free safety, more to me seems like it's Nick Cross's spot to lose more than it's a competition. It's just, okay, Nick, this is you, and unless you don't take advantage.
Right. That might be Nick Cross versus a free agent, though. Like, and not like a free agent's going to come in and compete with him, but it's more like, Nick, if you look great in training camp, we're not going to bring in an outside free agent. But if he gets hurt day 1, or like the first couple of days, it just looks rough, he's blowing assignments and it's just not going to work out, that's when you got to look at the Quandre Diggs and the Justin Simmons that are out there in the market. But look, Nick Cross is still very young. I think he's 22 years old, 23 years old. Like, this is still a very young player. He's younger than the Colts' 1st round pick that they just had this past offseason. So very young player. If he can figure it out, like, there's no need to go out there and get that top free safety that we've been talking about all offseason. So they're giving him that shot, and it's his job to lose. Like, really, this training camp is like, it can't be bigger for anyone else besides Nick Cross. Because if it's going to work out, man, like, this is your shot. They are finally giving you that run with the starters. Like, it has to be this year. It has to be this 3rd season, this 3rd off season for him to really put it together. And I'm excited for him. I hope he can turn those flashes that we saw, like that Pittsburgh interception, into more consistent play on defense, because just the upside of what he could bring with that athletic profile is very nice.
Yeah, without question. Oh, shoot, I think that's about it. I mean, we're less than a month away now. I'm ready to get it going. I mean, I'll be out there every day for you guys. Zach and I always do a show after practice, usually a live show, and I'll usually have my notes on horseshoehuddle.com as well. So, I mean, you shouldn't have to have another home for Colts training camp coverage than here.
Awesome. Make sure, if you guys are a fan of Locked On Colts, you're out there screaming Jake's name from the stands, getting him to turn around and wave to you. He is a celebrity on the sidelines there. Wear your Locked On Colts gear, wear whatever it is. Make sure you're screaming and yelling for Jake. Hold up a big sign that says Jake, turn around or something.
I'd prefer if you didn't. But I don't mind meeting you guys when it happens out in the wild. That's fine.
There you go. There you go. Make sure you guys are checking out for Jake and obviously all of your favorite Colts players there in training camp. And make sure you get out there to a couple days if you are in the Indy area. Before we get out of here, though, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7. Covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available in the free Fire TV channels app. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube where we listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.